We're two brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Haiku. I do, and I do it for that good hip hop music, man. Now, the thing about a classic hip hop album is that nobody knows that it's a classic immediately when it drops, right? Because a good album is usually very stacked. It's got like layers, and it takes time for those layers to actually unpack themselves, right? And a good example of this is the Book of Proverb, right, by Proverb. That album dropped in 2005, but the best selling rap album for 2005 was actually an album called Styling Gel by Pitch Black Afro, right? And the year after that, the best rap album went to Dukes for Mafuko Army. I think that was the name of the album. That was in 2006 at the Summers. And in 2007, the best rap album there was by, I think it was Flabber with his album Guli versus Flabber. And then in 2008, it was actually Double HP who took the award for best rap album for his album Acceptance Speech. Now, 10 to 15 years later after that, all these albums that I've mentioned that have won awards and were the best selling, nobody actually talks about those albums, and they rarely ever come up in conversations. But strange enough, the Book of Proverb, which never won any award or didn't even sell that much when it actually dropped, it actually even today is considered by the hip hop community to be, the best rap album to ever come out of South Africa. So what I'm trying to say is, while there's a lot of focus on, the streams, the downloads, how many shows an artist is getting, how many endorsement deals, the real true measure for a good hip hop album is actually time. So it's not numbers, it's not accolades. It's about time. Can an album stand the test of time, So I actually felt exactly the same way about this album by Priddy Ugly that he dropped last year called Soil. I feel like, if you look at the production, if you look at the lyricism, if you look at the whole concept of the album, there's actually a lot going on in this project. And I feel like we're not really talking much about it, but I feel like at some point we will be forced to have a conversation about this album. Now, I'm not saying, I'm comparing, Soil to the Book of Proverb. But what I'm saying is, if we look at the albums that dropped in the last 2 years and which ones we'll be talking about in the next years to come, I'm putting my money on Soil. I'm definitely putting my money on Soil. So yeah, for today's reaction, I'm actually looking at a song called Rap Relay by Priddy Ugly from the album Soil, and he's featuring Maglera Doe Boy. So yeah, I just want to put a disclaimer that, I'm gonna sound a bit preachy on this song, and that's basically because it's one of my favorite songs, and I'm very passionate about the lyrics, those that I can make out anyway. So yeah, without wasting time, man, let's just jump straight into this reaction here.
It's a marathon, but if you tryna race, just know I'm too better. I never stayed in my lane, I learned to move clever, never lose ever. Few errors fused together, like a Satan had a twin, I'm too hella.
Let's just take that back. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah. It's a marathon, but if you tryna race, just know I'm too better. I never stayed in my lane, I learned to move clever, never lose ever. Few errors fused together, like a Satan had a twin, I'm too hella.
Oh. Okay, last time. I'm sorry, guys.
It's a marathon, but if you tryna race, just know I'm too better.
He says it's a marathon, and if you try to race, just know I'm tuned better. So tuned better basically means like cars. When you tune up a car, it's when you make it to go faster. So he says this rap thing is actually a marathon, right? But if you want to race, because a marathon is something that, like it extends over a period of time, which is how he's basically looking at, his music and, his time in the game. So he's saying it's a marathon, but if you want to race, if you want to sprint, just know that I'm actually tuned better, which means that, he's comparing himself to a car to say he's tuned better.
I never stayed in my lane, I learned to move clever, never lose ever. Few errors fused together, like a Satan had a twin, I'm too hella.
I never lose ever. Few errors fused together, right? So he says that he makes a few errors, he's fused together. And like if Satan had a twin, I'm too hella. So too hella, it's like it's a slang term for being like when you're too hella, it means you're too nice, basically. You're too hot. So he says I'm too hella, but that too hella, it's actually a play on two hella, two hells, right? Because if Satan had a twin, we would have two hells. So that's why he's saying, like if Satan had a twin, I am two hella. So that's a nice play there.
Lose ever, few errors fused together. Like if Satan had a twin, I am too hella. You lose feathers, I got the stripes to herd the few zebras. A killer with the raps to murder whoever.
He says you lose feathers, right? A loose feather is something that gets blown by the wind. He says you lose feathers, I've got the stripes to herd a few zebras, right? Which is a nice play there because zebras travel in a herd, right? But he's comparing himself and rappers to say he's earned his stripes in the rap game, right? Because he's earned his stripes, he's got those type of stripes to herd a few zebras, which is to lead other zebras, which is other rappers who've also earned their stripes in the music game. So it's a nice play there to use that animal reference to say, zebras, because zebras have stripes, but he's also talking about earning his rap stripes so that he can lead other rappers in the game, basically.
Lose feathers, I got the stripes to herd a few zebras. A killer with the raps to murder whoever. Leave your crew severed. Rude pressure got you dudes measured. New header on the newsletter where your crew end up.
Hey, he says, I leave your crew severed, right? It means that he leaves the crew cut, basically. He chops them up. He says, group pressure got your dudes measured. Group pressure, which is peer pressure. He says, the peer pressure in your group, I've figured you guys out. I've got your dudes measured. I've figured you out that you basically, you're falling victim to the peer pressure in your whole, in basically your crew.
Group severed, group pressure got your dudes measured. New header on.
And then he says, new header on the newsletter. That's where your crew ends up, right? Meaning, basically, the death of your crew, you and your crew will basically make the headlines on the news because that's where you and your boys are basically going to end up. You're going to end up on an obituary and your death is going to make headline news, right? Because your guys are succumbing to group pressure. Now, a lot of people might think that he's actually talking about Aries, and I guess we'll find out.
The rap to murder whoever. Leave your crew severed. Rude pressure got you dudes measured. New header on the newsletter where your crew end up. Blood ain't thicker than cheese, I'd rather ooze cheddar.
Blood ain't thicker than cheese, I'd rather ooze cheddar. So that's from the line, blood is thicker than water, right? Because if you choose blood because it's thicker than water, cheese is thicker than blood. So, instead of choosing blood, then just ooze cheddar. Just choose cheddar, basically. But obviously, he's not talking about the actual cheddar cheese, but he's talking about money. To say, if blood is thicker than cheese, I'd rather ooze cheddar. If blood ain't thicker than cheese, that's what he says. I'd rather ooze cheddar. I'd rather basically go for the money instead of blood. So that's a slick play, actually.
On the newsletter where your crew end up. Blood ain't thicker than cheese, I'd rather ooze cheddar. If love is making you bleed, you gotta choose whether you pursue pleasure or choose legend to soothe pressure. Consume better cause life's really the true treasure.
If love is making you bleed, you have to choose whether you pursue pleasure or you choose leisure in order to soothe the pressure. But whatever you decide, you have to consume better because life is really the true treasure. So that's pretty straightforward. I think we need to dissect that one.
Cheese, I'd rather ooze cheddar. If love is making you bleed, you gotta choose whether you pursue pleasure or choose legend to soothe pressure. Consume better cause life's really the true treasure. Consume lecture, we rebuke and refuse. That's why they had to go and shoot Hector. Politicians, the new jesters, they lieutenants. These lieutenants abuse tenants, yeah.
Fuck a Zoom lecture. We rebuke and refuse lesser, meaning we reject anything which is less than what we actually deserve, right? We rebuke lesser. Why did they have to go and shoot Hector? I mean, that's the question we all have, right? Why did they shoot Hector Peterson? And he says, there's politicians, they are new jesters, right? A jester is usually a clown. Like in a circus, there's these clowns. They usually have like these weird hats and funny faces. So it's basically saying, because clowns are people who are put on a platform in order to entertain us. That's basically why he's referring to politicians, saying they are the new jesters, because they just put on the screen in order to entertain us, while they hardly ever take care of any important issues that they really need to take care of, for the people.
But rebuked and refused. That's why they had to go and shoot. The politicians, the new jesters, they lieutenants. These lieutenants abuse tenants.
These lieutenants abuse
politicians, the new jesters.
They loot tenders, and we all know in our country what's basically happening at the moment with with the tenders. What happened to the 500 billion? Nobody knows.
They lieutenants, these lieutenants abuse tenants. Yeah, these schools move too reckless. Remove his spoof necklace, spoon sheep starve soon as they lose shepherds to shrewd leopards who choose separate. The school lesson, these schools need platooned efforts.
No, these goons move too reckless, right? Goons are people that you send when you want them to take care of some ish for you that you can't take care of yourself. So he says these goons move too reckless. Remove your spoof necklace, which is your fake chain. Remove your fake chain. And then he says, spooned sheep starve as soon as they lose shepherds, which is a very great metaphor to describe the people who are being led, right? People who are sheep in any situation, they starve as soon as they lose a shepherd, as soon as they lose the person who's leading them, right? So he's talking about groups, basically. So, most of the time, in hip hop, because hip hop was a movement that was started by groups, right? Like the music, in the beginning of, even like from our golden era coming this side, we had this whole thing about groups, right? So he says the thing about groups is, other people in the group are spooned sheep, and they'll always starve as soon as they lose a shepherd. The one who's leading the group, it always becomes obvious who's leading the whole group, right? So, Easy talking about Aries and his crew. I don't know.
Jesters, they lieutenants. These lieutenants abuse tenants. Yeah, these schools move too reckless. Remove his spoof necklace, spoon sheep starve soon as they lose shepherds to shrewd leopards who choose separate. The school lesson, these schools need platooned effort.
To shrewd leopards who choose separate, right? Now, what we know about leopards is that leopards usually don't share their meals, right? They'll go out there, they'll hunt, and then they'll take their meal up to a tree, and that's where they'll eat it. So they don't share, basically. So that's why he says to shrewd leopards who chew separate, right? Who eat alone. He says the school lesson is these goons need platooned efforts, right? To say the thing about groups is they need platooned efforts. They need some kind of platooned efforts. You could look at it as like a task team, right? They need to move as a unit. They can't do this thing alone. Where else, he being a rapper who raps alone, he's able to make these moves. He's able to chew separate, as a single rapper, instead of these guys who need platooned efforts, who need to move as a unit. Easy talking about Aries and his crew. I don't know, but what I do know is, in 2020, I think it was 2020, Aries signed a deal with Platoon Records. Is it Platoon Records or Platoon Entertainment? I don't know, something like that. So his use of the word, these goons need platoon efforts. I don't know if he's actually referring to the management company Platoon that Aries did sign under, or he's just continuing he's basically talking in general to say, this thing about crews, it's a problem because you end up needing the effort of the other members instead of being able to handle your own business as a rapper. So I don't know, man. Maybe we are reaching by using that reference for the use of the word platoon, but I don't know.
Shrewd leopards who choose separate. The school lesson, these schools need platooned efforts. Who dressed their suit texture is bootlegger. My hue fresher, more Hugh Hefner, you more like Cruella. Caitlyn was once Bruce Jenner. This new era, you can assume a new gender.
He said, "Who dressed ya? That suit texture is bootlegger," meaning that suit is basically fake, right? It's a knockoff. That suit texture is bootlegger. And then he says, "My hue is fresher," meaning, hue is like a color. So my hue is fresher, more Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner, we all know, is that old rich man from the Playboy Mansion. Yeah, from the Playboy Mansion. So he says, "I'm more Hugh Hefner. You are more like Cruella." And Cruella is from the animation movie 101 Dalmatians. That evil woman who actually looks like a man. So this is actually a nice scheme here because he says, "You're more like Cruella. Caitlyn was once Bruce Jenner," right? Because Caitlyn Jenner is actually Bruce Jenner. I think his name was William Bruce Jenner, who is the father of the Kardashians, and then he went to do a sex change, and after he changed his genitals, he actually changed his name also to Caitlyn. So he was Bruce Jenner, and then he turned into Caitlyn Jenner. So that's why he starts the line by saying, "You're more like Cruella. Caitlyn was once Bruce Jenner. In this new era, rappers can assume a new gender," right? Meaning rappers are now turning into pussy. It's another way of him saying rappers are turning into pussy. So the way he plays that whole scheme there is just, it's insane.
That suit texture is bootlegger. My hue fresher, more Hugh Hefner. You more like Cruella. Caitlyn was once Bruce Jenner. This new era, you can assume a new gender. Two-stepper, Supreme sneaks got renewed leather. Yeah, I am all the fruits and my whole juice fresher. Chili from the roots like my flow grew pepper. Africa, the true Mecca.
A two-stepper. So a two-stepper, you know what a two-stepper is, man. He said a two-stepper. And then he says, "Supreme sneaks got renewed leather." It's basically swag. He's talking about his drip, to say Supreme sneaks got renewed leather. And then, "I am all the fruits cause my whole juice is fresher." That line, I don't even know how to explain that line, but it's dope. Say, "I am all the fruits cause my whole juice fresher. And I'm chilly from the roots like my flow grew pepper." Because we know that pepper is chilly, right? And then he says, "I'm chilly from the roots," meaning I'm hot from all the way in my roots all the way up. And his use of the word roots, there's a lot he speaks about being grounded on this album because the album is soil. So it kind of plays into the concept of the whole song, of the whole album, basically.
From the roots like my flow grew pepper. Africa, the true Mecca. Yeah, Fits of Fufu, Magazana, Majita, Babolayana, Dariana, like Stone Cold Brock Lesnar. Memoirs of the Dariana, then Pasa Italiana, talking numbers with my cousin Sol Kessler. Demigod.
Fits of Fufa out of Magazana, Majita, Babulayana, Badiana, which means they're beating each other. Like Stone Cold Brock Lesnar. Memoirs of the Dariana. Dariana is the language that is spoken by I think it's gangs. I think it's 20, whether it's between 26 or 28. They speak a language called Dariana. So he says these are the memoirs of Dariana. Obviously, if you know Maglera, you know where he grew. He basically grew up. You know his relationship with gang culture. So he says these are the memoirs of the Dariana, right? The Mpahla Italiana, meaning the clothes are from Italy. And then talking numbers with my cousin Sol Kessler. Rest in peace to Sol Kessler. I think he owned a lot of property. I think including Sun City. I think the whole entire is it Sun International? I think he either owned the entire Sun International Corporation or he owned a significant share there. So places like Sun City, Emperor's Palace, Monte Casino, stuff like that. But yeah, he says, "We're talking numbers with my cousin Sol Kessler, demigod." And a demigod is someone who's like half human, half divine entity, basically.
Dariana, then Pasa Italiana, talking numbers with my cousin Sol Kessler. Demigod is new Mecca. I'm through heckling. If Bruce hiding from the Hyde, then we go and Mr. Hyde, no Jekyll.
That line is insane. He says, uh through Mecca, this new Mecca. So Mecca is a holy city in, I think it's in Islamic city. I think it's an Islamic city. It's considered to be the holiest place in Africa by most Muslims because that's where I think Muhammad, the Prophet, was actually born. So he says, this new Mecca, I'm through heckling.
Like Dariana, talking numbers with my cousin Sol Kessler. Demigod is new Mecca. I'm through heckling. If Bruce hiding from the hiding, then we go and Mr. Hyde, no Jekyll.
Now this line is crazy. If Bruce are hiding from the hiding, then we're going Mr. Hyde, no Jekyll. Now there's a novel by it's based on Dr. Jekyll, I think, who was a scientist, right? But yeah, without going much into that whole novel, basically, Mr. Hyde is Dr. Jekyll's like split personality, alter ego, if you want to put it that way, right? So he says, if bros are hiding from the hiding, then we're going Mr. Hyde on them because Mr. Hyde was actually a killer. So he says, if rappers are hiding from getting a beating, if rappers don't want to feature Maglera because they're afraid of getting a beating, because a hiding is a beating, if they're hiding from getting a beating, then we're going to turn Mr. Hyde on them, of which Mr. Hyde was basically the killer version of Dr. Jekyll. So that's why he says we're going Mr. Hyde, no Jekyll. But it's also a nice play on Hyde there because Mr. Hyde was Dr. Jekyll's alter ego or his other personality. He was basically hiding in Dr. Jekyll. So if bros are hiding from the hiding, then we're going Mr. Hyde, no Jekyll. So that's dope, man.
I'm through heckling. If Bruce hiding from the hiding, then we go and Mr. Hyde, no Jekyll. My tooth metal, my huge Nubian. Just left the dunes, my platoon, but better my can do.
Just left the dunes, my platoons, Babitza Makendun. The dunes is the white pearly beach sand that is in Cape Town. Right. There's a place they called the Dunes in Cape Town, which is actually where this song was actually recorded. Because I know that there was a time where they went on a boot camp. A few rappers, I think Maglera was there, Priddy Ugly was there. There were a few other rappers, some of them from Joburg, some from Cape Town, and then they booked a house in Cape Town, which was where they basically were making music together. So this is one of the songs that was made when they were on that boot camp. So that's why Maglera saying just left the dunes, meaning he probably went to the beach on that day. He says, just left the dunes, my platoons, Babitza Makendun. Makendun is like mostly like Kokas, when someone who makes things happen, Makendun is to make and do. It's like Afrikaans term, but loosely translated in the township, it just means someone who knows how to get things done, right? If we have to make things happen right now, we Retsa Makendun, whether whichever ways and means we use to get it done, as long as we get it done. That's what a mic can do basically is.
Metal, my huge Nubian. Just left the dunes, my platoon, but better my can do. Tutankhamun out the two. Black Russia good. Gogilele Zaza like cruise. Look to the moon when I'm foolish. True number foolish. Remington Goldich have food.
Hey, Tutankhamun out the tomb. Now, Tutankhamun was a pharaoh, right? I think it was like the youngest pharaoh to ever rule in during those Egyptian times. So Tutankhamun out the tomb. The reason he's using it in that sense is because when Tutankhamun was buried, he was buried with a lot of his wealth, right? So he had a lot of jewelry, a lot of gold, a lot of, like other priceless possessions that were actually in his tomb. And when his tomb was actually discovered, it was labeled as the richest tomb that was ever discovered, right? So he says Tutankhamun out the tomb, meaning when you go to Tutankhamun's tomb, there's basically a lot of jewelry, right? A lot of gold, and that's what Maglera is about. He wears the chains. He's got the grills and stuff like that. So that's actually a dope line there.
Just left the dunes, my platoon, but better my can do. Tutankhamun out the two. Black Russia good.
Black Russia Ghoul. Well, Russia Ghoul is the guy who taught Batman how to fight. Apparently, I've never really watched much of that stuff, but I know that Russia Ghoul is the dude who taught Batman how to fight. So he calls himself the Black Rashagun.
Like look to the moon when I'm booted. Two number foolish. Remington gold the chafu. Rap niggas fufu like fufu. Fufu fugazi. Rats just like Gundi no Mazi. Maza last week in a Mazi. Talking the rati. SPI need me a rari. Tunzingiling and this dachi. Grasshopper kaki. Indo smoking, Indo bachi. Vigile hopa kakati. No batakati. Tell them hi in a kakati.
Okay, I have to go back there. I just have to go back. Where should I start? Okay. Rap niggas fufu like food, right? Now what I know, the only thing I know about fufu is it's like a dumpling, right? It's like a West African version of a dumpling. But it doesn't look nice. Well, from the pictures anyway. I've never tasted it. But it says rap niggas are fufu like food, and then it says fufu fugazi. Like fugazi means something that is fake. So I'm taking it in a sense that fufu is fugazi, and which means that the fufu, that food, that West African version of a dumpling, is actually a fake, right? I take it that's what he means. Rats just like Gundi no Mazi. Rats just like Gundi no Mazi. If you grew up watching your TV like most of us, then you know who Gundi and Mazi are. It's like these two rat characters on the show. So he says these rappers are rats just like Gundi no Mazi. And then Maza last week in a Mazi. A Maza is a party. When he says Maza last week in a Mazi, I don't know what a Mazi is. And then talking that Rati, I'm not sure if it's an official clothing brand, but what I do know is that it's about expensive linen, expensive designer fabrics. So it's got to do with designer fabrics. That's why it says talking that Rati. SP, I need me a Rari. I need me a Ferrari. I mean, we all need a Ferrari, Maza last week in a Mazi, talking the Rati. SPI need me a Rari. Tunzingiling and this dachi. Grasshopper kaki. Indo smoking, Indo bachi. Two Nzingeling and a stachi. I'm assuming that means 2 chains and a stachi, which is, a fabric, like a shirt. Basically, the way he was dressed on the music video of Bodega, so it's like a shirt with 2 chains. So that's what I'm assuming, a 2 Nzingeling and a stachi, based on that Dariana language. That's basically what he means. And then he says indoor smoking, indoor bachi, smoking that indoor green leaf. Zingiling and stachi, grasshopper kaki, indoor smoking, indoor bachi, vigile hopa kakati, no batakati, tell them hi in a kakati. Oh! I don't know what vigile bakakati is, whatever that is. But it says right there at the end, he says no batakati, tell them ha ina kakati. So no witchcraft and tell them we ain't got no problems this side. Basically, in short, that's what it means. But yeah, that's the end to my reaction to Priddy Ugly's rap relay, and it's a really dope song. I mean, it's one of my favorites on my playlist. And it's actually been for a while. So yeah, that's basically it. And remember, man, take care of your mental, and peace and love. And I am out.